Hello everybody and welcome back. We're talking yearly cornerstones. We're going to be talking legendary today. We already did the epic. If you guys want to check that out, check out my last video. I could link it. I'm not gonna. You guys can find it. I do a pretty nice playlist. Just subscribe to my channel and then check the playlist, and normally you'll see part, whatever part this is, the part before is generally the video that I'm referencing if I do so. That being said, let's jump into this video. We're going to talk alarm bells today. This is our first perk here. And what I think, I grade them on a 1, 2, and 3. I also explain why I put them into a 1, 2, or a 3. 2 is like average. 1's generally always a good choice. And 3 is, it's very niche, which means you generally only want to pick it if you really need it. 3 is also like if you're winning, winners win. So you pick it because you're already winning, in my opinion. You can disagree and tell me why I'm wrong in the comments below, but there are perks that I feel like generally are, if you're already winning, they help you. So anyways, the Brass Order's newest invention. All workers have a 5% chance of producing higher yields for every 90 points of expected corruption per minute in Hearth. This is probably a B tier one. This is a number 2 for me. This is like a average, because this is going to decide if how much corruption you're getting. Are you producing corruption? Are you using rainwater? All that kind of stuff that's going on. Because some players do not, even at high levels of prestige, don't use much rainwater, or they don't use a ton of it. So this is really, if you want to play around with rainwater, this can be useful as long as you're maintaining control of said rainwater. And there's also epic cornerstones that go really well with this if you get them. So I'm going to put this in B tier. I'm going to put it as average because it's going to depend on your playstyle. It's going to depend on if that buff is useful to you. But I can see it being good. Again, double yields though, I feel like you get a pretty high base double yields just from all your choices in the upgrade tree. And if you put the right species on the right thing, you're generally going to be almost producing, by the end of your Hearth, you're looking at almost like a 30 to a 40%. So what's 5% times 4, like what's another 20? 50%? I mean, that means every other time you're getting double yield. I mean, 30% is every 1 and 3, and normally at that point you're probably okay with the double yields you're pulling. So I'm going to put it as a B. It has use, but I don't think it's as useful, and you're also managing something to get the bonus. The cost of knowledge can be very high. You can see the contents of undiscovered glades. But discovering a dangerous or forbidden glade kills 1 villager. This is very nice because it allows you to see things at the cost of a villager. This pairs very well with a lot of the epic choices. I'm not a big fan of those choices, but if you get Ancient Pact, those choices become a lot better because you're gaining the bonuses, and you're also controlling the gains of those bonuses. That being said, you're also going to have to manage your glades better because you can't just cut into glades willy-nilly. Not that you should be anyways, but you can't cut into glades willy-nilly because you're just going to start losing a lot of villagers. And some species may be more valuable to your society and your playstyle, and they might get killed. And you don't get to choose. It's not like, here's your villager, he's going to go, you pick. It just takes one. So that's something to think about. Back to nature. An old forbidden ritual increases all yields by 100% in all buildings that use fertile soil, but you lose all food at that point, cooked and raw. This is really nice. The issue is you normally will get this at the beginning of the season, which means when you're planting. And if you have no camps going and you're mostly running off fertile soil, you're going to not have food. You need to make sure that you have food when you do this. This is a choice that when this pops up, if you get this early on and you have a couple things of fertile soil, it's really nice to get. But because of the negative, you need to ensure that you have a camp that has some food stored. Oh, actually, does it take from your food stored in your camps? I've never actually thought about that before. Either way, as long as you have a camp and there's food on the ground that you can pick from, that's the only way you can really do this. Because normally you will start to get very hungry and sad before they can pick the next harvest. So you need to be able to just worry about that. So essentially you need to ensure that you're using a camp to at least alleviate the initial hurt of this. But if you have a bunch of fertile soil, and you have the one camp with a couple mushrooms on the ground or whatever you can use for food until then, it's not a bad pick. You just got to get this early on. Baptism of Fire. Every 3 burn right cis lowers hostility by 10. While the hearth is corrupted, you're unable to sacrifice resources. The issue with this one is it has a negative debuff to it. It's actually really good. And then they have this stipulation, which makes it not as good. So, this one's hard for me to rate. I'm trying to think about this. Lowering hostility can be very useful. Because of the negative, I'm going to put this in B. This is very, to me, this is very situational on how you're playing. This is not like a year 2 pick for me, because I'm usually not worried about hostility at that point, and I'm not also worried about corruption. I'm not sacrificing. This would probably be a year 4 pick at the earliest, and I guess not sacrificing won't be necessary because we have the lower hostility reduction that you're going to be gaining from it. So I mean, it kind of cancels out the need to even do that anyway. I don't know. I'm still going to put it as a B. I can see both the negatives and the positives to it. I wouldn't pick this unless you know you need it, I guess is the way I'm going to put it. You need some sort of hostility reduction. I think there's better ways to reduce hostility, and that's why I'm kind of looking at this like, eh. A crystalline filter designed to mitigate the negative environmental impact of infused rainwater. Blight Rot cysts appear 50% slower when using rainwater, but reputation resolves generate 90% slower for the next 2 reputation points. This one's a solid pick. I would probably say this is a 1 or a 2. Depends on your needs. It's going to lower the blight rot that you're getting from using rainwater, which means rainwater can be used easier. All it does is reduce the resolve for the next 2 reputation points, which generally shouldn't be detrimental to you because you should be alright without it. Normally you can use orders to get the first couple of points to help you get a couple of the buildings that you need, and then all it's doing is slowing you down for probably a year, and then you're just going to go back to normal anyways. And also, sometimes slowing reputation points can actually be okay. So, it could actually be useful to actually slow reputation points. And then it just makes blight rot easier to manage, and we always like managing things easier. So, I'm actually going to say this is probably a one pick most of the time out of all the choices so far. I could see me just picking this one because I'm like, I'm going to use rainwater, and it pretty much is a net positive overall. Even the negative can be seen as a positive sometimes. Blight Rot spores aren't technically eggs, but they taste the same. You gain 5 eggs when a Blight Rot cyst appears in your settlement. If you're using a lot of Blight Rot and rainwater type stuff, you get free eggs. Not a bad choice. This is probably like an upper B choice because it's just a positive on something you're going to probably already be doing. If you're not using water and you're at a higher level, this isn't good because you're not going to be getting Blight Rot. So that's something you have to factor in. But I'm going to go with, the possibility of both. That's why I'm mentioning them. Gain 3 tools every time a villager leaves or dies. This obviously goes and pairs well with something like the Ancient Pact above, where a villager dies when you discover a glade. You just get some free tools out of it. This is probably a B tier, lower B tier, because it requires a death of a villager. So if you don't have control of it, you're just getting 3 tools when someone dies randomly. And generally, when people die randomly and you're not controlling it, that's bad. Normally, you want to have control over the deaths of your people. Because if you are controlling it, you're allowing it to happen. Whereas when you're not controlling it, that means you're probably losing your settlement in a way. And you need to invest in things that are going to help you succeed. Not that tools don't help you that when you're losing, because they do, but you should be playing to win, because winners win. We don't plan to lose. Gain 20 coal for every 3 burn Blight Rot cysts. So, again, you're using rainwater and all that, and all the rain punk engines, good. If you're not, no. Again, also when I say winners win, by the way, if you're picking things that are playing around death, you are playing to win. You're playing to win around death. If you're just dying is where I'm getting at. Winners don't win that way. Generally, you just don't want to lose your civilians. Rainwater seems to soothe the forest. Hostility is reduced by 10 for every time you use 150 units of rain, water, and rain engines. You gotta make sure you remember it's rain engines, because that creates blight rot and issues. Because if this was just in like porridge and anything else, this would be extremely broken. Because originally when I read that the first time a long time ago, I thought this said anywhere. And I was like, man, this is super good. And I picked it, and I'm like, why am I not getting the bonus? And then I realized it was only rain engines. So this is like when you power buildings. It is useful if you're using rain engines in buildings, because it's going to lower hostility. You're going to be getting blight rot that you have to worry about, but you're also just lowering hostility, which is better for you in a way. You're dealing with another issue to get rid of other problems, in a sense. One who lives in the harmony with the forest. 40 hostility. It can be added later. This is a good late game choice if you made empathy choices. But this is not something I ever just pick, because you don't, unless you're getting empathy for hostility, it's not worth picking until you know you took those choices. All buildings cost 40% less, but newly discovered resources node to 5 charges. Buildings costing less generally isn't that helpful, in my opinion. So I don't normally pick this. I would say this is probably a C tier pick. Someone's gonna be like, this is an A tier. I just don't see it. I've read this before, and I'm like, oh yeah, 40%. That's pretty good. And like, then it just gets rid of charges, and I'm like, like why? I don't want to get rid of my charges. So if you're at the end of the game, right? And again, this is like a late game choice to me. Like this is something you would pick at the end of the game where you've already cut into your glades and you don't really need to build anything. So it's helping when it's not helping. Like, you're either getting it super early and then just taking the hit on charges, right? So if you're using like fertile soil or something, I can understand. But other than that, I don't see why you would do this. Most of the time, buildings they don't cost enough to make a 40% reduction, in my opinion. Anyways, moving on. I'm going to put that in lower C, because I just don't see its benefit. I think if you could literally just make this all buildings cost like 20% or 30% less, and then take away the negative, and it would be a fine perk. It would be like a B. If you leave rainwater for a while, it will begin to release a pleasant and warm vapor. Food production speed is increased by 15% for every 50 units of drizzle water stored. So this one is only the stored water. So if you increase your storage for drizzle water and you get a good amount of drizzle water stored up, you can get a very high, fast amount of food production speed from this very quickly. So this is actually a solid choice when you're producing food and you have access to drizzle water. Simply put, I'm going to put this as a high B choice, because I think it requires drizzle water, so there is a requirement. But once you have said requirement, you're probably looking at 100 to 200 storage of said requirement, and you're probably going to be getting a 30 to 45% buff, if not higher. They do cap, like the production speed does have like a cap on it, so it's only going to go so high anyways. But you're probably going to be getting like a 30, and you're actually going to be seeing the value from it. Machinery specialized in extracting copper from petrified trees gains 1 copper for every 5 wood produced. All crystallized dew production is reduced by 1. Pretty much if you're not using crystallized dew, you're using copper. This is fine, because you're just getting copper for every 5 wood. So every time you cut down 2 trees and a half, you get a piece of copper, which if you're using copper is good. Apparently there is a technique for extracting crystals similar to amber from rainwater. Gain 10 amber every time you use 50 units of rainwater in engines, but traders will have 1 less perk or blueprint for sale. The issue for me is this reduces your perks or blueprints for sale. No likey that. So I'm going to put this in C tier. Amber is meant to get so you can buy things, and reducing the chances of buying things to me is not that useful. It also requires that you're using rainwater, which means you're dealing with blight rot, So I'm not only taking a penalty of using getting Blight Rot, but I'm also losing perks on my traders that are going to help me be more successful to fight against the loss of time that I'm getting from Blight Rot for 10 amber that I can just get normally without having to worry about any of that problem. All houses have one room more for one more villager. This is an okay perk. This is like an upper B perk. It just does something positive. It costs less resources to house people. I like this one. It's controllable. You control it because once you pick it, you know each house is going to hold at least 3. You know, it's one of those perks that it does something, and you have full control over it once you pick it. You don't have to worry about it. It doesn't give you a negative, and it just does something for you. Essentially, it reduces cost for you is what it does. Global production speed is 33% faster, but traders arrive 50% slower. You can tell that I need a drink of water. Global production is great, but traders arriving 50% slower is bad. Generally, there's other ways to get up your global production speed, and traders, I think, are more important than your production speed most of the time. Maybe at the end of the game, you might pick this because you might not need traders as bad. That'd be the only time I would take this. So I'm going to put this in, like, B tier, but I'm putting lower B. It's a lower 2. It's a lower mid-game, or it's a lower middle average, like, middle tier kind of perk. It has its use, but it's going to be it's either a niche situation or you just don't need traders, which traders are nice. Generally, in the very beginning of the game to like the mid game, you really like to get traders. Beyond that, they're just nice to have because it's just giving you bonuses. Because once you start winning, you don't really need them. Anyways, continue. 2 rain punk hauling carts will be assigned to the main warehouse to help transport resources between buildings. Just a solid buff. You just get 2 hauling carts to move around and help you. I'll put that in high B. It does nothing negative, and it gives you 2 things to like move resources that takes away time from your other workers to have to do that. The issue is it's only 2, and it's only for your main warehouse. There's a perk that I think every warehouse gets a hauling cart, and if you have more than 2 warehouses, that obviously beats this one. So again, this is going to be based on your needs, but I would say this is like probably a B tier pick. It just helps you. It's a middle pick. It has no negative to it. Rumor has it that it's one of your settlements, one of the wealthiest. Newcomers arrive 15% quicker, and they bring 10% more goods for every one level of standing you have with other settlements or trade routes. So this just gets better over time, and it just is solid. It gives you more goods, and it gives you more people. The issue is it does stack. So the more you trade, you do have control over this in a sense, but you do not have control over this in a sense. Because you could lose control or get too much, and then get very high, and then not be able to maintain the newcomers coming. Which I guess you could just ignore them at that point too, though. So I guess you still have control. You just might be missing out on the goods. So I would argue that this is a relatively good choice. I could see this being like a tier 1 choice most of the time. If you get this, you're not unhappy with it because it's going to do something for you. The fact that we have the DLC and the frogs give a 50% quicker as long as they're on the hearth, you can just kind of put them on for a little bit and then pull them off and get that buff. Kind of makes this not as good, though. But I'm just going to say, if you look at it in a general sense, you're probably looking at least 30 pretty quick, and then 20, pretty early in the game, and it's just going to make you more successful. So there's a level of control to it, I will say, but I would still say it's a middle tier, but on the higher end of the choices. It does something positive that's going to help you throughout pretty much the start and the middle of the game, and then at the end of the game you might have to watch it just to make sure you're not hurting yourself. Exploration Expedition. You took some of the best explorers from the Smoldering City with you. Global Resolve is boosted by 5 every time you discover a new glade, but woodcutting is slower until you open at least 2 glades. Global Resolve bonuses. This is really good, but it's really, I don't like things that give me a boost that goes away. I like my boosts to be consistent. So what I'm going to say here is I'm going to put this in lower B. I think it's not bad. I just want to use it, but I can see uses for this. This could be a really good, I need to cut a glade open to get the 5 resolve to end the game kind of buff. That being said, I normally don't have an issue where I don't have access to orders for resolve, or I haven't won based on getting enough resolve through my people. Anyways, family gratitude. Relatives of your villagers send gifts for treating their family members well. Get 40 water skins for every full reputation point obtained through high resolve. It just gives you free water skins. This is a pretty solid choice if you have high resolve. So I would say this is a later game pick. It's probably not. You're probably not going to get this at year 2. You might get it at year 4, year 6. But pretty much everyone coming in just gets 40 water skins, so. Farsight. Scouting ahead makes it easier to prepare for the worst. Discovering a small grade increases the work speed of scouts. Investigating dangerous glades for 50% for up. So pretty much what you do is you pop a small glade, then you go to a big glade. This is going to be like a lower B tier. You need to pop a glade that you might not want to pop to get a bonus. And normally, you don't need to. This is like a really interesting situation. This is like a losing, to me this is like a losing mindset, right? Like, you pop open a dangerous or forbidden glade, you're like, oh my god, I cannot handle this glade. And then you have to like get the resources, and you're like, oh my god, I might not make the timer. I might not make the timer. And then this pops up after the storm, and you're like, wow, if I pop this small glade real quick, it'll make everything 50% quicker, and I can get this done in time. But then you might never use it again. And you just you increased your hostility for nothing, because you popped a small glade you didn't need. So I'm going to put this in lower B. I don't want to put it in C because I don't think it's that bad. I just think it's very niche. I think it's a niche. I think it's a relatively net positive, but it is niche. It's just not niche enough for me to say it's going to be like a not choice. Glade event work speed increased by 30%. Resources you sacrifice in the ancient hearth burn 25% quicker. This is pretty solid. Firekeeper's Prayer is pretty solid. I would put this in 1 or higher B tier because you should be winning and not sacrificing things in the hearth unless you really need to. Like, it should be like an emergency anyways. So this just makes it so you're less likely to lose out on events like this, where you would need to pick a talent like this. It gives you just more consistency, and you don't have to. The sacrifice that you're doing is probably not going to hurt you that bad. Anyways, moving on. Firelink ritual. There is nothing the forest hates more than fire. Every villager with their need for religion decreases the forest hostility by 5. If you have a bunch of species that need religion, and you have religion access and incense to make that function, this is just super good because it's going to lower hostility for you. Lowering hostility is generally really nice. Powerful and precise machinery parts can be produced in the smithy. If you have the smithy, this might pop up, and it allows you to make parts. Parts are really nice to have. Parts can be better in certain situations, but I think just being able to produce parts is nice. I'm going to put this as a higher B, just because parts are really like useful for selling. There's just a lot of things you can use parts for. They can use parts for making buildings. You can use parts for selling. Parts are extremely useful, and just having access to actually being able to produce them is very good. You have free samples, 1 part for every time you sell 25 golds, 25 amber. This is just solid because you can get parts for every 25 amber. I wish this was. I would actually argue this the Forge Trip Hammer is better than this. But I would say that the free samples isn't a bad choice because you're going to be trading. You'll probably get a couple parts out of it. And those parts you could either use to make more amber, or you could just use them in something. Again, this is going to be almost RNG dependent too, because it depends on how much access you had to parts on the glades that you got and all that kind of stuff, and how much you started with. The crown is very forgiving. As long as you keep the goods flowing, impatience grows 30% slower every time you finish a trade route. I don't like this because generally I don't care about slowing down my impatience. That may just be me. I don't run into situations where I need to slow down my impatience. Again, I would say this is probably lower B. It has a use. It just activates and works because every time you finish a trade route, it will work. It just slows impatience down. But do you need to slow the impatience down? I guess that's the question, and that's going to be for each player in each run. If you need to lower impatience in a run, good. If you're controlling your impatience and your hostility and everything and your resolve, you don't need to worry about it. This is almost like one of the ones I would consider like a loser mindset in a sense. But this one, because it has no negative and it just works, I'm going to put it in B tier. Because it does do its job. It's just, I just never need to lower impatience. Sometimes I need impatience. So, confused, empty-eyed creatures emerge from the hearth. Each time Voice of Sealed Ones triggers after the hearth reaches 100% corruption, 3 villagers appear in the settlement. Gives you villagers. If you need more villagers and you're using a lot of rain, water, good. If you're not using a lot of rainwater, useless. So that's something you gotta figure for yourself. It depends on the playstyle you're going with. And that's what I'll say about that. This doesn't really work well with things that reduce corruption. Again, playstyle, RNG, all that kind of stuff is involved in that one, and therefore it's hard for me to rate it. Depends on what you're doing in your playstyle. It's a playstyle decision on where it ranks. That's what I'm going to say. It could be really high on your playstyle or really low depending on how you're playing. Global resolves increased by 5, but the chance of villagers consuming twice the amount of food during break is increased by 50%. I don't want them to eat twice as much food unless I have an abundance of food. This is a late game choice 100%. It is a very strong late game choice generally, because normally in the late game you will have an abundance of food and you won't need to worry about it. I've had runs where I've had so much food that I could literally never run out. They could eat twice as fast. My specialized food might run out, but they would always at least have the common food. I would never run out of it while making specialized foods. So that's a solid choice for the late game. If you're like in need of a win and you need a couple more points of resolve at the end, you pick this and you end your run with generous rations. I don't see this being a pick just to pick for the extra resolve. I see this as like a victory. This is like a victory type of cornerstone right here. So I'm going to put this in like B tier because I think it has its use, but I think it's more of a I want the global resolve to win. Because if you're in a situation where you might not be able to be managing your global resolve, and then you start getting rid of your food, especially your specialized food, you're going to lose more resolve than you're going to gain in the long run. So you need to be winning really to have this perk. And then it's just going to help you finish the match off. Every warehouse gets an automated rain punk cart. This is better than the one above that gives 2 for the main warehouse if you're building warehouses. Normally, if you do fertile soil, I highly recommend that you build warehouses next to almost every farm or plantation, whatever you're using to get whatever resources you're getting from the fertile soil. Because when your villagers have to carry it, they'll carry it right to it. Especially if you don't have harpies, it just makes it way easier because then they have more time to pick crops and plant crops. It's also important that your hearth's kind of near your farms and stuff. So, anyways, I think this one's really nice because it just helps take goods from buildings such as your farms and unload them so your farmers can keep working. And obviously, as I said, if you have more farms going and you have more warehouses, you're just going to have a ton of carts to just help unload your farms. I wish, and something I hope that they add to the game maybe later, is that you're able to take haulers and rain cart, like punk carts, and actually assign them, like a secondary assignment to haul from a certain building. Because I'd like to be able to haul from, like, this warehouse hauls from this plantation, so that the one that's right next to it, that hauling cart will always prioritize that plantation over anything else. That would be a very nice thing to have control over, because sometimes the hauling carts will all go to the same building and unload it, and you don't even need that building to have that happen. I've seen that happen in games before with this option, but I do think it's a good choice. I think this is a solid high B because it just does what it does, and as long as you have warehouses up, you'll be fine. The crown doesn't need to know everything. There is no impatience penalty when villagers leave or die, but impatience will grow 600% faster starting from Drizzle Year 9. This is like an early game choice. The issue is I like impatience, and I don't plan on losing. So this is a losers lose kind of choice in my opinion. You don't need this. You can get better things that make you win before Year 9. So focus on winning and not losing. Hidden from the Queen is a loser's option. Do not pick a loser's option. And I know that might upset people. I'm not calling you a loser in particular. I'm just saying you're banking on losing. Like, it's such a weird choice to me to pick something that you're banking on losing. Also, impatience can be very nice on controlling hostility and stuff, so it's not something I would want to reduce. All camp production is I shouldn't say I wouldn't want it, reduced at the amount that it's reduced. The issue is you'll probably never reach Year 9 even with this. I'm just saying it's just weird to me that you would even pick this because of most of the time you want impatience anyways. All camp production is increased by 100%, but all buildings that use fertile soil will not have a reduced rate. It does not affect the woodcutters camp. There is a separate one that does the woodcutters camp that's essentially the same idea as this. That being said, this is a solid choice on the map that does not have fertile soil, which is the mushroom map, because your camps you're gonna be more reliant on your camps. I actually have this going on in my game right now, and I have the meat bonus for every 1/25 production on meat, and I'm producing like 6 meat right now, and the next node I finish will turn into 4, and then this will double it and make it 8. So each of my guys gathers 8 meat every time they go to a node for a pole, which is just insane. It's going to get even higher too because I already have access to more meat. I'm pretty much have infinite meat at this point because of this perk and my other perk combination. That doesn't mean I won the game, but it does mean that meat production's super high for me, and eggs and stuff will be at least 2, so I shouldn't run out of food. This is a super good choice if you don't have fertile soil. I do wish that this actually did affect the woodcutters camp. They didn't have a separate one for it, but we'll get to that. I just feel like it's good. It would be super good if it affected the woodcutters camp as well. I think it would be almost too good, and that's probably why they are separated. Woodcutters are tasked with creating makeshift tools. Discovering a glade during a storm grants 10 tools. A lot of the times busting a glade open towards the end of the storm is not a bad idea because that gives you a lot of time to deal with the situation during the nice periods. So this is actually a pretty good choice, and it gives you 10 tools, which allows you to deal with a lot of things. So not a bad choice. It's like a B tier choice. This is probably, by the way, this is probably a tier 1 choice or a high middle tier choice because depends on the map. Like mushroom map, this is probably like an A tier, 1 tier as I call them, like a high pick ratio, compared to a map that might have a lot of fertile soil where you plan on using fertile soil. You might be more focused on fertile soil type things. So yeah. Anyways, I think this one's a middle tier choice. If you have nothing better, this is not a bad choice. Just make sure you're cutting the glades that you want to cut open at the end of the storm, and that you have it, you plan to do so. Like you have like a couple trees that you can just cut down, and you can do it in the last like 30 seconds. An unusual amount of supplies can be found in glades. You just gain 40 meat, 40 grain each time you get a glade event complete. This is just a solid resource increase. I'm going to put this in B tier. I'm actually going to put this in lower B though, because it's, you got to go to a dangerous glade or a forbidden glade and then do an event. And you're only going to probably do that a couple times, maybe 3-4 times tops, unless the game runs really, really late. So, yeah, I would say it's useful, but probably not as useful as it could be. There's better choices. I mean, as I just said, I'm pulling eight food with this choice, right? Per 20 seconds with 2 people doing it. So I'm pulling 16 food every 20 seconds, and I'm going to get 40 meat one time. Just not that useful. There's better ways to get bonuses. Gain 1 amber for every 50 wood produced. This is like a solid high B tier choice. You're just getting amber for cutting down trees, which you're going to be cutting down trees almost the whole game at all times. You're going to gain... trying to think. I wish this was a 2. I think this would be a lot more useful if it was a 2 and not a 1. But it's not useful. It's just, you just get a little bonus. I'm going to put it in B. I'm actually going to put it just in middle. I think it's a middle tier choice. It's not like a high B or a high... or a low B. It's like a 2, and it's a solid middle tier 2 or a B. That's what it is. It does something, and it's helpful. It has no negative effect. A faint image of underwater landscape inside the ancient jewel. While the ancient hearth is being corrupted, resource sacrificed in it burn 50% longer. If you have corruption and you need to sacrifice stuff, good. I don't sacrifice a lot in my hearth, so I wouldn't pick this. But I can see it is what it is. It's like a B. It's like a 2 or a B tier choice. It's a middle tier choice. Big strategic changes always come with adjustment period. Every neighboring town offers 2 more trade routes, but no trader will arrive in your settlement until you at least complete 3 trade routes. Pretty much, if you have 3 good trade routes that are options, and you see this pop, you can pick this, and it's just helpful. But this is RNG dependent, so I will say that the better your RNG is, like if you get something right in the drizzle season that's going to offset this, and you can just easily do it. You just pick those 3 options. You pick this, and then you have more trade routes, and you're going to be in a better place. This is a pretty high choice for me. Almost any of the time I could see me picking this, unless I get really unlucky in my trade routes for the season or something where I know I'm going to get no trader, and I'm going to have to deal with not having a trader for a long time. A collection of oh my god. I'm going to stop talking. Of drafts from a very early period in Citadel's history. Unlock all camp blueprints and upgrades all small camps to their advanced version, but gathering speed is decreased by 50% until you use at least 300%. I don't use this because normally I prefer fertile soil personally. On the maps where I do use camps, I use normally the meat camp, and I normally will just bring it instead of a lot of the time in embarkation is where I will take my plantation, or I'll pick my herb garden, or I'll pick my small garden, or I'll pick my meat gathering hut. Like, I normally don't get them as a blueprint, I don't normally try to buy them as blueprints, so I would argue that this is not that useful. It's good at what it is, don't get me wrong, but because of the negative to it, it's just not worth it most of the time, because there's other ways to get those things without hurting yourself. Anyways, you are allowed to miss piercers with such a weird gift here. The queen has high expectations are high. The contents of glades will be revealed. Each discovered glade increases the impatience by 0.5. This one is... I like this one better than the one that kills a villager. That being said, you don't... You're going to want this early. And the one that kills a villager is a little bit nicer because you're not going to be getting so much extra impatience from it. And villagers are generally, their lives are probably worth less than impatience, like getting impatience at the amount that you're getting here is. It's very hard to say. It will depend on the game, really. But you're going to want this early on, generally, and same with the other one. So you're really not going to know what you're running into until you pick. I would argue that I have better success with the one that has the death of villagers than I do with the one that has impatience increases, because I generally will use traders to increase my impatience, to get them there sooner, to get the skills I want early on. and then I control that impatience. When I add this to that, my play style, the way I tend to play, it requires me to play differently, and I feel like it overall weakens my run. So I'm going to say this one is extremely powerful, but you need to play around it. So it's still probably a tier 1 pick, because it's good. I would just say the one that takes out a villager is probably better. Mushroom Seedling, if you have farming soil, is so good. This is one of my favorite. It goes super well with plantations. It's almost broken because berries and mushrooms essentially cover everything. And then you have plant fiber, which makes fabric for you. So then you have pretty much access to all foods, you just have access to the trading packs for, getting more amber. You have access to pack of trade goods for just selling for gold, and for doing anything else in the orders because a lot of the orders that increase your farm production and make your farms better requires packed goods. So it just makes everything easier to do. I like this one a lot. Gain 2 wood production after each storm. All stored wood is removed. Gain 50 insects in return. I don't like this one. This is essentially getting more wood than sacrificing that wood. Essentially, you need to either use all your wood by the storm, or you need to just... This is like really micromanaging your civilization. Like, it's a weird thing because the wood production doesn't really help you, because it does. It pretty much means you need one less lumber mill. That's the way I look at this thing. It's like, I'm not going to need the other lumber mill that I would be running, and then in return, I just get 50 insects. It's not a bad choice, but it's a different play style. You're going to be cutting through trees a little bit slower generally because of that, which means you need to focus more on the glade you're cutting through instead of kind of cutting in an area, which I tend to do. Different play style definitely works with the play style, and I pretty much just explained exactly how you would play, and the best way to use it would be probably one lumber camp, make sure you're using said lumber, and then get your insects at the end of the season with hopefully not a lot of leftover wood stored up. Anyways, an old inscription on the bottom that says fortune and glory increases the chance of doubling event loot by 50%. This is a solid net plus of 50% more loot. I would say that's pretty strong. Most of the time you have a good amount of loot on your glade events. So you're probably looking at like around 40 plus, 30, 40. So you're probably looking at, 45 or 60 instead, depending. Not a bad choice. It is limited by opening glades, though, so that's something to factor in. And it's only a 50% chance. Some woodworkers just can't stop working. Gain 3 barrels for every 10 planks. If you have beavers, in particular, this is super good, especially if you have the lumber mill. If you have the lumber mill and beavers, this is super good because you're always going to just be getting free barrels. Barrels are very useful, unless you have other ways to make barrels, because they do require like copper and crystallized dew most of the time. They can be decently difficult to make comparatively, so getting them free for 10 planks just gives you some access to something to hold, pickled goods and other types of stuff that you might need barrels for. So I will pick this most of the time if I have a lumber mill, because almost all the time I have at least one beaver just sitting there pumping out planks until it hits like 80 or 100, because why not? So I do like this. Global gathering speed is increased by 30%, and newly discovered resource nodes have 10 more charges. Every depleted resource node spawns a blight rot cyst. This is solid. I would normally use this if I'm not going farms, like fertile fields. Like I actually I'm considering grabbing this on the run I'm currently doing, where I was just talking about my meat production, just to get more charges on my glades to have more. But I'm also just gaining so much, I don't know if it's even necessary at that point. And there's a negative to it. So this is probably like a lower B choice because of the negative. There's other choices that are more positive that will do almost the same thing. Because you got to remember, if you increase the production of a deposit by 1, and it has 30 charges on it, we'll just say, you just got 60 charges if you think about it that way. So this is not as useful as it looks. and it has a negative to it. This should really, I don't even think they should really have a negative here. I don't think it's necessary to have this. I would probably reduce the global gathering speed by like 10%. Leave the charges as is. Maybe drop this down to just 20 and then make no negative. It would still be a useful buff to get, and then you would just gain a little bit of extra, and you'd be a happy person. This is just an unnecessary problem to have on something that isn't as good as it could be. Gain 1 global resolve every time you sell goods worth of 50 gold amber, but scouts work 10% slower on glade events. I would probably never take this because of the negative to it, but I could see it. I mean, towards the end of the game in particular, you can just get you stack global resolve. This would be like a winning choice for me. Like if I'm already winning the match and I'm trying to finish the match off, I might buy this at the end or pick this at the end and then just sell a bunch of goods to make sure I'm getting all this extra global resolve. The forest recedes as a heavily guarded traded caravan pour into your settlement. Hostility is reduced by 15 every time you sell goods worth 30, but complex foods needs grant less resolve. There's other ways to reduce hostility. This also has a requirement of 30 amber to reduce hostility, and then it hurts your resolve. I would never pick this. I'd be extremely desperate for hostility reduction if I was picking this, is all I'm going to say. Queen's Gift. A mysterious amber orb is trapped within. Increases the ancient hearth resistance by 150 for every woodcutter in your settlement. This just makes you more resilient when you're using rain punk type stuff. And you're always going to be using woodcutters, so this is just a net positive generally. Yeah, I just say if there's not a better choice, I could see me picking this if I didn't want to reroll for something better. This is like a slightly above average. It doesn't really have a negative, and it's just going to make your settlement easier to operate. The people are feeling oddly rebellious, can gain 1 global resolve for every 2 impatience. Every time a villager leaves or dies, impatience increased by 0.2. I like how there's fire in the background. Everything is fine. This reminds me of the dog with the coffee cup and the fire behind him. Everything is fine. Gain 1 global resolve for every 2 impatience points. Yeah, I could see me picking this. And I've picked this a couple times. How good is it? Right? I think max impatience is like 14 or 16, right? So the most you're going to probably get before you die is like 7 or 6. I think. This is an alright one. I don't think you need this. There's better ways to get global resolve, and I don't think the negative really even hurts you on this one. I don't see this being a problem. This is just something you pick to get some extra global resolve. But I actually don't. I think there's better ways to do it. I think this is more of like why not, and you just grab it because there's nothing else there and you're already doing alright. Increases the chance of doubling the loot from abandoned caches by 100%. This doesn't apply to perks and blueprints, but newly discovered resource nodes have a fewer charges. 5 charges small, 15. Yeah, I normally don't pick this one. Just by looking at it, like what it does is fine, but it makes other things less consistent. So unless I'm going fertile soil, and I have access to fertile soil, and I already know that I have access, I'm not going to pick this trait, because I'm going to be taking hits somewhere else where I might actually need the resources. Newly discovered resources have more charges, 5 for small and 15 for large. This is just a net positive. This is something I will pick, especially early on if I see it and there's nothing better. I consider this a pretty high, like, level 2 tier choice, which is like a middle ground for me. I would say it's the upper choice, though it's almost in the, the 1 tier category, or what I consider like S or A kind of mix there. Yeah. This is something I would take. If I didn't see anything better, especially if I wasn't going fertile soil like on the mushroom map, I'd probably just grab this one if I saw it. And now we're to the rooty grounds, which is the equivalent to the hunter-gatherers. Strange roots spread across the ground. Wood production is faster, but harvesting and planting are slower. Again, if you're using a map that doesn't have fertile soil really, like the mushroom one, or you're not planning on using fertile soil, this is fine. You just grab this and you just get a little bit more wood. This is just one of these kind of, you grab it and it does what it does, and it doesn't really hurt you that bad. Same with this one. These are the ones that I like the most at the beginning of the game, because I can pick this and be like, okay, this map doesn't really have fertile soil. The likelihood I'm going to be able to use fertile soil is pretty low. And even if I find it, I can still use it. It's just not going to be as efficient. And I get some extra wood. And wood early is nice. And then this one's like, oh, I get more nodes early. Nice. No negative. This one has a negative. That's the only difference. You are knowingly sacrificing farms in a sense when you pick this. You don't have to completely sacrifice and not use them. It's just going to be a lot less useful to you. So normally I only pick this in the mushroom map, where I'm guaranteed to not be able to use fertile soil, especially if I don't have a human on me. The crown sends 2 royal guards to your village. Instead of simply brawling, villagers will need to train under them. Fulfilling the need for brawling grants additional 5 resolve, but attacking a traitor will resolve into impatience. This is like one of those things I'd say, this is just a better way of getting resolve for brawlers like lizards and foxes than picking the choice above. But again, this is only for the people that are brawlers and their needs need to be fulfilled. But essentially it's just additional resolve for brawling. What actually would be really cool for this one would be if any civilian that has access to brawling gains, like lizards in them, gains a net. There's a couple ways to do this. I would like to see this be like a +2 to everyone, and then lizards and foxes and anyone else that has brawling, which I'm not sure if anyone does, would gain like an additional 3. I think that would make this a much better perk. Hostility is reduced by 40 for every hearth upgrade to the neighborhood. This is a nice pick for hostility reduction. This is one of my favorites because it just reduces hostility by 40 and then probably by 80. You're probably going to gain 80 hostility reduction just from... You're probably going to have 2 hearths at least in your game. You might even get a third. So having this is pretty much a net 80 hostility reduction. This is a nice hostility reducer without having to worry about anything else but upgrading your hearth, which you're naturally going to do. So this is one of my top tier choices. I really do like this talent, and this is like one of those ones, if it pops up and you see it, especially if you need hostility reduction currently, it's just a good choice. Securing the deadliest corners of the forest will make it a lot less terrifying. Completing events reduces hostility from the glades by +2 and from small glades by +1. This is really strong, and it's retro. So what it does is it just lowers the hostility you get from doing glade events. So you're gonna net like quite a bit of hostility from this. This is like one of those other things I would say this is a solid choice because you're generally gonna do this. You're probably looking at least a -6 to hostility per. You're probably looking at decreased by. It's probably not going to be as helpful as this, to be honest. But you are going to be getting a little bit of hostility reduction. You're probably looking at like a total of 24, maybe like 36. But you're probably not going to be getting much more. It depends how late your game runs. But I would argue that this one overall is better, just because it has no requirement other than your hearth, which you're going to be doing. This one requires you to pop open more glades and deal with more events, which you may not be able to deal with and cause yourself problems. And the bonus you get is really strong, but it's stronger the more you open up. So this allows you for more late game running because you can cut more glades without having to worry as much. But it's only helping you the more glades you cut in a sense. It's a weird bonus to get. Like, this can be way better than this, but this is generally going to be just a better way of decreasing hostility. The fresh resin will still glow softly and rain's essence. Gain 4 crystallized dew for every 20 resin. Certain maps where you just have resin on trees, like the basic map, the Royal Woodlands is really good to get this, because you're just getting a 4 crystallized dew, which is good. But this is going to really be based on if you have access to resin or not. Or if you have the, fertile soil thing and you're producing resin, then you can get this and get that. But you already have access at that point to get crystallized dew if you want it anyways, so it's a weird choice. A joint venture with a Stormwalker skill can be very profitable. You gain 15 amber every time you accept newcomers, but you lose all stored upon choosing it. Never pick this. Why would I want to lose my amber? This just forces me to buy things I might not need. I don't think I've ever picked this one. And now I know why. I just read that and I was like, yeah, I would never do that. Anyway, Survivor Bonds. Makes all your villagers 10% quicker and gives them a +1 to global resolve. This is just a net positive. This is like a 1. This is a 1. You just pick this and it makes your run easier, because your villagers get to take their breaks quicker, they get back to work quicker, and they just get extra resolve. I actually like getting this as a choice later when I pick the legendary ones that actually help me like get more resources and stuff. Like at year 5, normally if I see this one, I just snatch it because I'm gaining a 1 resolve and 10% speed. Even year 3 sometimes if I see this one, I'll just snatch it because I'm like, do I reroll and risk something worse, or not something that's going to directly help me, or something that might not be super good for me, or I just something that gives me net bonuses. This is something that you see that you know is going to help you. When you re-roll at that point, you might not get something. The only time I might not take this is in the first year, which is the second year, because that's when you get your first legendary perk. At the end of the first year into the second year, because I don't need it as bad. But the villager speed is always helpful, and so is the resolve, really. But it's really the villager speed there. It's just a good pick. This is like a pick that you can always pick, and you're never you may not be super happy, but you're never mad. The settlement is known for being a major trade hub in the region. Gain 1 reputation every time you sell goods worth 60 amber, but filling orders awards 50% less reputation. This one's fine. I mean, it just helps you win by doing trading. Essentially makes trading a victory point instead of doing orders. That's what it does. So what you do is you fulfill orders before you I don't know, is this a timed one? I'd have to go, oh my god, I'm not doing that. I don't think it is. I think you can like leave and still pick this. So I would say what I would do is, if you see this one and you just fulfill all the orders you can fill, and then you click this button, you probably just win. And you just start trading. Get your reputation way up and then just trade for victory. For every 10 completed trade routes, all houses will have room for 1 more person. I don't like this one as much as the one that just adds a +1 to housing. And you might ask why, because overall this might give you more room. You can't control how much room it is in the house, because you're going to be probably, throughout the game, you're going to probably complete more than 10 trade routes. You're probably going to complete like 30 plus. So you're talking each house is probably going to have 5 rooms. It's just, that to me is like, it saves a lot of resources. It takes time to get, but it saves resources. But the issue is, towards the end of the game, if you're winning, this doesn't really help you. Like the one that gives you a +1's immediate, you can pick it right at the beginning of the game, and it helps you because it just takes less resources at building specific species houses. Whereas this one, you're going to have to trade to even get to that point, and then by the time you're getting towards the next 20, you're either doing really well, or you're in the middle, or you're probably losing because you're getting towards the end of the game. So, or not the end of the game, but it's starting to get harder for you. So I just feel like it's unnecessary at that point, because most of the time, like, production on fabric, bricks, and wood is pretty easy to do, and you don't need to worry about house construction anymore, so you don't need this. Villagers have a 10% high chance of double yields, but consumption control is disabled. I hate this because consumption control is super helpful. And double yield is pretty high even without getting this bonus, so I just don't see the need. I don't take this. I think that the lack of consumption control just makes it unnecessary. If you want to take this, you must give all your wood. This is just a +1 to all wood production, but you lose all stored fuel upon picking this cornerstone. I like the one that reduces the fertile soil better, generally, because most of the time, if I'm going fertile soil, I'm not worried about wood in the first place, because I'll make oil a lot of the times, because I like plantation, personally. But you lose a lot of your other stuff, like your, I don't know, your coal. I'm trying to think of all the other resources. Your oil. And there's one other one I'm not thinking of right now. The sea marrow or whatever it is, the bones. And that's more like, if you don't get this really early and you're willing to sacrifice, like, normally your starting coal and whatever wood you have, you can take this and it's fine, but you really don't need wood production that bad. Like, most of the time I don't need the +1. The issue is normally in the beginning of the game, the +1 is not bad, but later on it's just not necessary. The Royal Woodlands, you definitely wouldn't even need this, so then having a negative to it makes it pretty much, why would you even want it? There are a couple, maps and biomes where having +1 wood production is helpful, but how necessary is it? It really depends on you as a player to make that decision. Gain 2 insects every time you cut wood trees down during the storm. Normally, on lower difficulties, I would say grab this. On higher difficulties, I would say no, because normally when the storm comes, you will minimize your lumbering. So, like, any woodcutters you have, you will pull a majority of them off the lumber mills to go do other jobs while the storm's going on, and then you put them on at the end of the storm, so you're cutting down less trees to begin with. On lower difficulties, you generally don't have to do that. So for a new player, this is probably really nice. For a later game player, there's better ways to get insects anyways, and different perks that we'll talk about later. So I would argue that this is really a difficulty chooser for me. When I like to play on like a nice easy settler or pioneer every once in a while just to relax, I'll grab this if I see it, just because I know it's not going to hurt me, because I'm never going to pull my woodcutters off, or I really don't normally have to in that mode, because it's just easy. In Veteran and Viceroy, I would never generally take this, because I'm more likely to pull my woodcutters off during the storm and reduce the amount of insects I'm even going to get. Plus, I play in a certain way where I know perks that I'm generally going to use to help me get insects and stuff, so if I really want them, there's ways to get them. So I don't really like, this one's probably difficulty dependent for me, that's how I'm going to say. It's probably a tier 1, which is good, like, A or S if you're playing lower difficulty, and probably a B, lower 2, almost a 3 for me, for the higher difficulties. Just don't think it's that good. Work safety, a standardized set of rules. Every villager that has their needs fulfilled increases global production speed by 5%. This is pretty solid. The issue is global production speed has kind of a cap on it in a sense. And you can reach that cap by upgrading hearths and doing other things. So this, to me, is not a buff that really is helpful. Someone can argue in the comments below and say that I'm wrong about that. I just don't see this being helpful at all. There's other ways to do it that I think are better. All workers have a 10% chance higher producing double yields, but they also have a 20% chance of consuming twice as much food during breaks. I don't need to produce double yields, because I'm almost pretty close to a 30% chance, I feel like, at most times, which is 1 in 3 chance of double yielding, which is pretty solid, and therefore I generally don't care about this. And then I just consume more food. So this is like a winning. I would pick this if I was already winning, maybe, and this is a choice just because I don't care about the food, especially if I have a bunch of farms going. But I don't need the yield bad enough either. So the negative almost outweighs the positive unless you're winning already. That's how I look at that one. anyways, guys, that's my thoughts on all the cornerstones. I hope this helps people playing the game. You guys are really, the game's very RNG and map dependent. It's very species dependent. It's really hard to make a list saying like this one's just super good at all times, this one's bad at all times. Most of the time you have to look at the resource you're getting from the perk. You have to look at the resources on the map. You gotta look at the species you have, what resources they need to really make informed and solid decisions on these kind of things. So a lot of the ones that I tend to rate higher are ones that you can just pick and they're going to be helpful to you and they really don't have negative consequences. And in most situations they'll be good. But even when I pick those, like the hunter-gatherers, for example, that gives 100% more on camps, but makes fertile soil less good. I know I'm not using fertile soil and I'm using camps. I pick that knowing I'm not using fertile soil. So if you're using fertile soil and this pops up, you don't go, oh yeah, man, this is awesome, because it just destroys all your fertile soil. You really need to look at the negatives and the positives, and you need to look at what you have access to, what the map has access to, which you can pause the game at any point, and it will pop up on the side of your screen what resources you have. So, or you have access to on the map without having to like buy them or create them. So anyways, you guys have a fantastic day. Hope this helps. Hope my tips help you guys make better decisions. We'll probably do an embarkation discussion, and I'll pick a random biome, and I'll go on, and I'll just click and show you the caravan and everything, and we'll talk about embarkation in creating a more successful chance, even with RNG, because at least you're working around the RNG that you're getting, and we'll have a little discussion on that. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one, and I hope you have a great day. Later.